Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome back. Welcome. If this is your first time here, by all means, you are now part of the family. And if this is your first time here, you do not know that last episode, I promised that this episode was going to be on the greatest manifestation tool ever. But I decided to do that next week. I'm pushing it into next week because I want to tie it with a manifestation project that I think that you might enjoy. So don't worry, that is coming up around the corner. Now, I don't know if you were aware of it, but yesterday, I guess Facebook was offline for about 6 hours. And not only Facebook, but Instagram and Twitter had some issues too. And what's the other one? Oh, Snapchat. Now, yesterday happened to be one of those days where I was actively involved in a lot of things non-online, non-internet, real world stuff. Now, there are aspects of the internet that are real world. But I guess, because Facebook was offline, some people were really freaking out. And my wife has gravitated away from Facebook and spends a lot of time on TikTok. And she's actually been urging me to start my own TikTok channel, which is probably coming around the corner because it's just another channel, another avenue for me to get my message out and hopefully bring in more listeners to the podcast. Speaking of which, have you left a review yet? Have you given me a 5-star? Have you taken a couple seconds and written a couple sentences about what you get out of the podcast? Now, some of you have emailed me, long emails, and I love those. I love that I'm able to be there at a fork in the road for you. And it warms my heart to know that it's made an impact for you, because that's really why I do the podcast. I don't do it for myself. This is not, self-indulgence. It's to further a message to you, just how great and wonderful you are, how powerful you are. I mean, just through sheer thought, you can totally transform your life, change your thinking, change your life. And that's what this podcast is about, how to change your thinking, how to shift your perspective on things. And I think this whole thing with the online world, social media, had some relevance. One is, were you one of the ones that were freaking out? And I do understand that some people have their entire business, their entire, world wrapped up in their online persona, their Instagram or Facebook, and, maybe they get paid for views and such, or that's how they drive clients to them. To me, it's an add-on opportunity. As far as business is concerned, my personal life, I do have pleasure, I take pleasure in promoting beauty, promoting positive thoughts, in letting people know what's going on in my life, sharing that. And I primarily share with everybody. I mean, if you want to learn about my life, I guess you just go to my page and take a look, because all my pictures are open to, the world, or public. They're made public. But with that said, there are some cards I do hold close to the vest. I don't share everything about my life. Some of it's none of your business. Some of it I like to keep private. But by and large, I live my life as if everything that I do could be on the front page or featured in Facebook. I would say front page of the newspaper, but those are few and far between anymore, aren't they? But it could be on the internet. That's one of the qualifying, conditions that I have to live my life in accordance with, not doing anything that I wouldn't want put on the internet or put on the front page of the paper. That's my check and balance in making sure that I'm in alignment with my integrity. I guess another way to say that is, would I be embarrassed if I got caught? Now, there was a time in my life when I would have been embarrassed, based on my behavior. I have skeletons in my closet. But I guess at this point, there's nothing that I won't talk about or couldn't talk about my past, because who I am today is completely different than who I was even 2 years ago. let alone 10 years ago or 12 years ago or 20 years ago when some of that stuff went down. I make it sound like a diabolical story. It's really not that interesting. Most people wouldn't be interested at all. It'd be boring. That's it. That's the thing. Because like you or many other people, can look back on your life and take a look at some of the mistakes you made, some of the actions that you took part in, and just come down on yourself with shame. Like, I can't believe you did that. Seriously? But you have to remember that who you were then, you were doing the best you could with what you knew at that moment. All the considerations you had, how much you had to eat, your sleep. We all know that we can get a little hangry if we don't, get enough to eat. So when you consider all the resources that you had available, your emotional state, your fear, whatever you were considering at the time, we always make the best choice we can in that moment. Hindsight is 20/20, to be sure. And we can look back on our life and say, we could have done this or we should have done that. But if you put yourself back in that moment, you would have made the same choice all over again. Knowing what you knew then, feeling what you felt then, you did the best you could. So let yourself off the hook. And right about now, you might be wondering, what the heck is this topic about? What's this episode about? I'm not sure. So just bear with me. It's somewhat stream of consciousness. So this thing with the internet happened. And, I grew up at a period when we didn't have internet. We didn't have computers, didn't have cell phones. And I don't want to be, when I walked to school, snow was way steep. It was, but I was a lot shorter then, too. Well, in Michigan, when I grew up, we would regularly get, 11 inches of snow, 15 inches of snow. We didn't go to school. But then again, the world didn't stop either. Unlike here in Texas, if we get an inch of snow, 2 inches of snow, everything is shut down. People raid the grocery stores in the anticipation of an inch of snow or freezing rain or some inclement weather. But I'm detouring on a loosely formed intention here. I want to figure out, or I guess I want you to ask, how dependent are you upon social media? How dependent are you upon your phone, your cell phone? If you got freaked out, how freaked out did you get when Facebook did go down? How dependent are you on your phone, your cell phone, for something other than just a phone? How emotionally dependent on it are you? You see, this podcast is all about mind stuff, mindfulness, perspective, consciousness, higher consciousness. And for better or worse, the internet is an extension of our consciousness. There's fewer things that we have to hold in our memory. We can Google it or DuckDuckGo it or whatever other search engine you use. You see, information is at hand, readily available. But I'm starting to get the intuitive guidance behind this podcast is I want you to realize that technology could go down at a moment's notice. We could go a stretch without any connection or communication. And I was made very present to that. My wife and I, our family was made present to that, and many other Texans were made present to that last February. Right after Valentine's Day, we had a cold snap come through and a deep freeze, which Texans were not prepared for. The power grid went down. It would go in and out. We went hours, days without power, heat, and single digits outside. The pool froze over completely. And unbeknownst to us, we had a pipe freeze in the wall when the temperatures dropped so much, and it ended up bursting when the thaw came through and we had a flood. But as things go, we came out on the other side of that better prepared. We turned those lemons into lemonade. We remodeled some stuff. We got new carpet. There was a plus side to going through that. Although I would not have chosen it on the front end, to be sure. It was a stressful time. It was just awkward and odd. But like I said, we're better prepared for a similar circumstance to occur. And if it happened once, it will happen again. I was a Boy Scout when I was younger, when Boy Scouts was, a positive thing. And the Boy Scout motto is be prepared. And with that said, it brings me to my suggestion for you is to create a thought experiment for yourself. Let's say Facebook disappeared. Where would you find your connection? How would you connect with people? If the phone system went down for a certain period of time, who would you have to connect with? Who would you have to check in with? Do you or could you create a different mode of communication? How would you emotionally deal with it? You have to accept things to a certain degree. When things happen, they happen. And lamenting over it or saying that it shouldn't happen, there's not much you can do about that. When we had no power, no heat, we built a fire in a fireplace. We didn't have a lot of wood, so I had cut down, a tree in the yard that I was supposed to cut down a long time ago, but I've been putting it off. But it was the perfect opportunity. It was waiting there. We connected with neighbors, who had extra wood. We had a neighbor that was he was going to build a shed, never got around to it. And he had all this lumber that was kind of dried out and brittle. And I took that. We didn't have water, but we had a swimming pool. So I chopped a hole in the ice and we filled buckets and used that bucket of water to flush the toilets and boil it on the stove for drinking water. My question is how prepared are you for things to shift, for things to change, things that you count on? Because if we've learned anything over the last couple of years, is that things can change a lot in a hurry. And it's how fast can you dance? I love the line from The Scent of a Woman when Al Pacino says, when you get tangled up doing the tango, simply tango out of it. So take an inventory of where are you dependent? Where are you really dependent? What can you put in place as a contingency for those things that you're leaning on heavily, so that if something does happen, you're not freaking out. You kind of thought it through. You have a plan. You have an alternative that you can dance around it, tango out of it. And that goes with anything in life. When things happen, and the Buddha said that the source of all our suffering is in our attachments to what we expected. We're attached to the way we thought things should be. And when they show up and not that way, and we're attached to it, that's when we suffer. We can experience the disappointment and then simply release it and then act accordingly with the given circumstances that are currently in front of us. I know this to be true from an intuitive perspective. Our consciousness as a species is evolving. Our mass consciousness, the level of conscious awareness, there are old structures that have been in place for years that you'll begin seeing falling away more and more to an even greater degree than we've already seen it. It's part of evolution, and it's not necessarily going to be comfortable. But when you can keep your wits about you and keep your center and stay grounded, adapt to the situations, come from it from a higher level of awareness, a higher level of consciousness, knowing that it is for our good, our higher good, and life is going to change. So part of our responsibility is to adapt with it, to shift with it. Like I started this out, I grew up, we had one phone and a 2-foot cord, no cell phones, no computers. Did you hear me? A 2-foot cord. So if you were talking on the phone, you had to stay right there. And sometimes you talked for an hour. And we thought we were really in the modern world when I bought a 25-foot cord. I bought it from JCPenney as a gift to my family. Otherwise, we probably would have had that old cord forever. And with that 25-foot cord, my mom could walk around the kitchen and cook dinner and, the good old days. But technology has evolved. I mean, I didn't grow up with a computer. I didn't grow up with video games. My mom, I left the house and said, I'm going to hang out in the neighborhood, and she wouldn't see me until dinner time. And I contrast that with our kids today, and we are so connected. My 22-year-old has never known life without a cell phone, for the most part, since he was old enough to use one. He's always had access to the internet. Me growing up, my internet was the World Book Encyclopedias, a set of 22 books that had all the known knowledge at the time. Well, I'm I'm minimizing that. There was a lot more knowledge available since then, but it was condensed. It was just about anything that you wanted to know was contained in those books. But I'm not telling you how bad I had it as a kid. I mean, I loved it. It was great. But how it was when I was a kid is completely different than the world we have today. Completely. Gasoline was like 30 cents a gallon, and the average car got 10 miles to the gallon. Contrast that with cars today, automobiles today. Some of them don't even work on gasoline. You have electric cars. Who knew? It was just the science fiction when I was a kid. And I can remember my dad saying that I had it so easy compared to him. You know, he grew up during the Depression or the aftermath of the Depression. And I remember vividly when he brought home our first microwave, one of the first microwaves on the market. And you could cook a meal in less than a minute. Well, by that time, I was 14 years old. I'd spent most of my life growing up without any quick ways to cook things. But this really wasn't the intention to go down memory lane for me, to tell you all the things that I had to deal with or didn't deal with when I was a kid. It really is for you to take a look at, talk about, become present to the idea that life is going to evolve even quicker and more rapidly than it has in recent time. I know this to be true, and I think if there's any purpose to me being in this platform or on this platform, it's to be a voice or to provide skills or ideas, mind hacks on how to deal with it, how to adapt, how to look at it from a spiritual perspective. And I'll be the first to admit I do not have all the answers, but I also know this about myself. There is nothing that I can't figure out given enough time. So take a look at your relationship to change. Do you resist it? Do you only step into a new future, kicking and screaming, hanging on to the old? Or do you release that which no longer serves you and adapt quickly? When you get tangled up doing the tango, do you stop dancing or do you tango out of it? I've adopted the saying from the Marines, and I've never served in the military, frankly, because I cannot follow orders. I don't like to be told what to do. And my father told me that I would sure be court-martialed. But with that said, I adopted the whole attitude of the Marines, improvise, adapt, and overcome. You know, given a situation, you have to improvise, adapt, and overcome. If you want a great metaphor, a great example of overcoming odds given, limited circumstances, watch the movie, if you haven't already seen it, Apollo 13. Rewatch it. It's a great example of not giving up, of being persistent and adapting to the changing conditions with what you have and making it work. And I guess one final note, if your business is on Facebook, you want to find a backup. You want to find a different channel to connect with your clients. Because if nothing, this outage was a wake-up call on just how vulnerable you could be to somebody else's program. And that's one reason why I created my membership program, to create a space, a community that was off Facebook, that was on its own platform. And if you want to find out more about that, go to my lead page, my link page, and that is yesdaniel.com, and check out my membership. Now, that's a paid membership, and I'm sure if something happens to Facebook, I'd create a free membership just to have a community for those of you that want to connect offline or communicate with me. And talking about connecting, I'm hoping these restrictions and stuff, that things will be a lot more tamer, I guess is the word, in 2022. I would like to travel. I would like to travel to different regions and connect with you guys, all y'all, in a meetup setting and just hanging out and getting to know you guys better. And the thing that I'm really looking forward to in my membership area is connecting with you on a more personal level, giving regular Q&As, question and answers, and live video, just having that platform to talk and interact with my members. And those of you that are a member already of our Facebook group, the Aligned Self Podcast Listeners Facebook group, you know that you can ask me anything there, and I'll answer it either in that post, or if it's a good enough question, or if I think that it will have a broader appeal, it could be the topic of a podcast. Because we only have a little over 100 people in the Facebook group right now, and several hundred people that are listening to the podcast all around the world. So sometimes a question is better addressed on the podcast to where it will reach a broader audience. And occasionally, I will answer your question offline, depending on the nature of your question. And truth be told, I love a good question. So, if you've listened to the podcast this far, thank you for your listening ear. I did ramble a little bit. I was a little all over the place, but the gist of the message is to take an inventory of where are your dependencies. How are you dependent upon it emotionally? Do you have contingencies in place? Because life is going to change. It always does. Intuitively feels like it's going to change faster over the next 3 to 5 years than it has in probably any other point in our history. This is Daniel Danovi saying, hang on to your hat because we're going for a ride. Follow your bliss and live the epic life.